Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we're stepping into a world where the sky turns to iron and the wind carries teeth sharper than any wolf's. You're about to become a mountain man in the 1830s, alone in the Rockies, and there's a blizzard building on the horizon that could bury you so deep they won't find your bones until spring, if ever. You've got maybe 3 hours of daylight left. Your fingers are already going numb, and the nearest other human being is 40 miles away through country that doesn't forgive mistakes. Good thing this isn't your life, right? Because out here, shelter isn't just a roof over your head. It's the thin line between waking up tomorrow and becoming another cautionary tale whispered around distant campfires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how this little community spans the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first snowflake lands on your cheek like a cold kiss, and you know immediately that this isn't the gentle dusting you saw 2 days ago. This is different. You're standing at the edge of a spruce forest in the Colorado high country, elevation somewhere around 9,000 feet, and the sky above has gone from blue to that particular shade of grey that old-timers call blizzard iron. The air tastes metallic, electric, the way it does when the mountain is about to show you who's really in charge out here. You've been trapping beaver along this creek for the better part of a week, and the pelts bundled on your pack horse are prime. Thick and glossy, worth their weight in trade goods back at the rendezvous. But all that means nothing if you don't live long enough to sell them. Your breath clouds in front of your face, and you notice it's hanging in the air longer than it did an hour ago. The temperature is dropping fast, that peculiar Rocky Mountain plunge that can take you from sweating to shivering in the span of a single afternoon. You learn the signs from a Shoshone trapper named Running Elk 2 winters back. He'd pointed to the pines bending under invisible weight, the way the birds had gone silent, the strange stillness that settles over everything before the storm hits. When the mountain holds its breath, he'd said, you better be dug in deep. You can still hear his voice, gravelly and certain, and you wish he was here now. But he's not. Nobody is. It's just you, your horse, and about 30 pounds of gear that suddenly feels impossibly heavy. The wind picks up. Not gradually, but all at once, like a door slamming open. It comes from the north, howling down off the peaks with a sound that's almost alive, hungry, relentless, ancient. The temperature drops another 10 degrees in what feels like minutes. Your wool capote, stained with smoke and grease and the blood of a dozen animals, suddenly doesn't feel nearly warm enough. You pull it tighter, but the wind finds every gap, every opening, probing like cold fingers searching for your warmth. This is 1834, and you're what folks back in the settlements call a mountain man, though you don't think of yourself that way. You're just trying to make a living in the only place where your particular set of skills, trapping, tracking, surviving, actually matter. Back in Pennsylvania, you were nobody. Out here, you're free. But freedom has a price. And that price is paid in moments exactly like this one, when the wilderness reminds you that you're not the apex predator you sometimes imagine yourself to be. Your horse stamps nervously, ears laid back, and you know what that means. Animals can sense storms before humans can, some instinct we lost when we started living in houses with solid walls. You've got maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 if you're lucky, before this turns from uncomfortable to deadly. The average mountain man's career lasted about 2.7 years during this era. Not because men quit, but because the mountains killed them. Grizzlies drowning in spring runoff, arrows from hostile war parties, hypothermia, especially hypothermia. You scan the terrain with practiced eyes, the same eyes that can spot a beaver slide from 100 yards or read tracks 3 days old. You need shelter, and you need it now. Not tomorrow, not in an hour, now. The creek you've been following runs through a narrow valley, spruce and pine crowding close on both sides. There, maybe 50 yards upstream, you spot what you're looking for. A rocky outcrop, maybe 12 feet high, with its face toward the south. At its base, several fallen pines, victims of some long-ago windstorm, their trunks thick as your thigh and still solid. The outcrop will serve as your northern wall, blocking the worst of the wind. The fallen trees are materials delivered by providence or luck, and you learned long ago not to question either when they smile on you. You move quickly now, leading your horse through the deepening snow. The flakes are coming faster, smaller now, the kind that means business. Big, lazy flakes are pretty but harmless. These are different, hard, icy, driven by wind that's picking up speed with every passing minute. They sting your face like tiny needles, and you have to squint to see where you're going. When you reach the outcrop, you tie your horse to a sturdy pine, loosen the pack, and let the gear tumble into the snow. Every item in that pile is essential. Your hawk and rifle, the canvas sheet you traded 2 prime beaver pelts for last summer, your blanket roll, the steel traps that are your livelihood, your possibles bag with flint and steel, and the precious charcloth that can mean the difference between fire and freezing. There's also jerked elk meat, a tin cup, a small pot, and your knife, a Green River blade that's saved your life more times than you can count. The light is fading faster now, that early twilight that comes with storm clouds. You've got work to do, and the mountain won't wait while you figure it out. Your hands are already cold, fingers stiff inside your elk hide gloves. You flex them, force blood into the tips, and reach for your axe. The hickory handle is smooth from years of use, the steel head sharp enough to shave with if you were the shaving type, which you're not. The first decision is critical. What kind of shelter? You've built lean-tos, wickiups, even helped raise a teepee when you were running with a band of Crow trappers last spring. Each has its advantages. A lean-to is fast but exposed. A wickiup is warmer but takes longer. You glance at the sky, at the snow that's already starting to accumulate on your shoulders, and make your choice. You'll build a half shelter, something between the two, using the rock face as your back wall and constructing a low, slanted roof that will shed snow and trap heat from a fire built at the entrance. You learned this technique from James Clyman, a mountain man who'd survived a blizzard in 1824 that killed 2 other trappers. He told you the story one night at rendezvous, his voice quiet, his eyes distant. Build low, he'd said. Warm air rises, so you want your space small, intimate with the ground. And always, always face your opening away from the prevailing wind. You get to work. You stand still for a moment, forcing yourself to read what the mountain is telling you before you commit to this spot. This is something the greenhorns never learn. The ones who rush in, swing their axes, build their fires, and wake up dead when an avalanche or a widowmaker branch takes them in the night, if they wake up at all. The mountain speaks in a language older than words, and right now it's practically shouting. The spruce trees around you are your first teachers. You notice how they're bent, not just swaying in the current wind, but permanently bowed, shaped by years of storms coming from the same direction. Every trunk leans slightly northeast, which tells you the prevailing winds come from the southwest most of the year. But winter storms, the killers, those come down from the north, spilling over the continental divide like a frozen flood. The trees on the north side of this outcrop are stunted, gnarled, their branches flagged away from the wind like permanent weather vanes. You crouch down, brushing snow away from the base of a pine, and examine the ground. The soil here is thin, rocky, with exposed roots snaking across the surface like wooden veins. Good. That means you're on high enough ground that meltwater won't pool here come spring, or worse, tonight if the temperature fluctuates. You've heard stories of men who built their shelters in innocent-looking depressions, only to wake up in pools of ice water when a warm spell hit mid-storm. Hypothermia doesn't care if you're technically out of the wind. Water is the great thief, stealing heat 25 times faster than air. The outcrop itself deserves close inspection. You run your gloved hand along the rock face, feeling for loose stones, checking the integrity of your would-be northern wall. Granite, solid, ancient, with only a few small fractures that don't go deep. No overhangs that might drop icicles onto your head while you sleep. That's killed more than one careless trapper, believe it or not. Nature has a dark sense of humor sometimes. Above the rock, about 15 feet up, you spot something that makes you smile despite the cold gnawing at your cheeks. Several thick pine branches extend over your potential shelter site, their needles still green despite the season. They'll provide a natural canopy, catching some of the snowfall before it reaches you, and their presence means the area directly below gets less accumulation than the surrounding forest. The old-timers called these spots mercy pockets, and they'd saved more lives than any fort or trading post ever did. You check the wind again, wetting your finger and holding it up, a trick that still works better than any fancy instrument. The moisture freezes almost instantly on the north-facing side. The wind is definitely building, coming in gusts now that make the pines moan like living things. You estimate you've got maybe 90 minutes before this turns from serious storm to lethal blizzard. Time to stop admiring the real estate and start building. But first, and this is crucial, you need to mark your territory in your mind. You pace off the area, counting steps, noting landmarks. That oddly shaped boulder to your east, the double-trunked spruce 20 paces west. In a whiteout, which is exactly what's coming, you could wander 10 feet from your shelter and never find it again. Men have frozen to death within arm's reach of safety because they lost their bearings in blowing snow. So you memorize everything, building a mental map that your half-frozen brain might still access when visibility drops to zero. The fallen logs you spotted earlier are a gift, but you need to verify their sound. You approach the nearest one, a lodgepole pine about 20 feet long and 10 inches thick. Kicking it hard with your moccasin boot, you listen for the hollow sound that means rot. Solid. You draw your knife and stab into the bark. The wood beneath is hard, dry, perfect for construction. Dead long enough to season, but not so long it's started breaking down. You offer a silent thanks to whatever storm knocked this tree down, probably 5-10 years ago, judging by the weathering. Now you scan for the darker signs, the warnings that separate old trappers from dead trappers. You look up, searching the canopy for widowmakers, dead branches hung up in living trees, waiting for wind or snow to dislodge them. There's one, about 30 yards south, a thick limb caught in a spruce's upper branches. You make a mental note to stay clear of that zone. Widowmakers earned their name honestly. They'd killed more mountain men than Indian arrows in some years. You check for animal sign too. Fresh scat, territorial markings, den openings. The last thing you need is to set up camp on top of a bear's winter den or a mountain lion's cache. You spot some elk droppings, at least 2 days old based on how the snows filled them in, and rabbit tracks crisscrossing through the brush. Good signs. Prey animals mean predators aren't denned up nearby. A grizzly at this elevation should be hibernating by now, but should be and is are two different things when your life depends on the distinction. The light is dimming faster now, that peculiar twilight that comes when storm clouds choke off the sun. You've got maybe 45 minutes of useful working light, maybe an hour if you push it. Your fingers are already protesting, that first stage of cold where they're stiff but still functional. You know the progression. Stiff, then numb, then useless, then frozen, then black with frostbite, then gone. You've seen men lose fingers and toes to the cold, watched a trapper named Dutch Henry hold up his hands at rendezvous, showing nothing but thumbs and scarred stumps where his fingers used to be. 10 minutes, he'd said. I was only lost for 10 minutes in a whiteout, but my gloves got wet. 10 minutes. Historians still argue about exactly how many mountain men died from exposure versus other causes, but the records that do exist are sobering. In one 6-year stretch during the 1820s, out of 180 trappers working the Rockies, 94 were killed by Indians, and dozens more simply disappeared, probably claimed by weather, rivers, or bears. The wilderness didn't keep good records of its victims. You position yourself with your back to the outcrop, facing south. This is where your entrance will be, where your fire will burn, where you'll spend the next 12 to 24 hours waiting out the storm. You're building what the French-Canadian voyageurs called an abri, a half shelter that's part lean-to, part dugout, part snow cave. It's not fancy. You note the slight depression in the ground at the base of the outcrop. Natural erosion has created a shallow scoop, maybe 6 inches deep and roughly 6 feet across. Perfect. You'll excavate that another foot, maybe more, lowering yourself below ground level. Heat rises, cold sinks, and every inch you get below the surface is borrowed warmth. You've heard trappers joke that the best shelter is a grave you can climb out of come morning. Dark humor, sure, but out here, that kind of gallows wit keeps you sane. The snow is falling in earnest now, fat flakes mixing with the smaller ones, visibility dropping to maybe 100 yards. The temperature has plunged. You estimate it's somewhere around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, but with the wind chill, it feels closer to 0. And it's only going to get worse. You pull your wool hat down tighter, adjust your capote, and reach for your axe. Time to build. The axe feels heavier than it should in your hands. That first hint that your body is already rationing energy, preparing for the siege ahead. You shake your arms out, forcing blood into your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists. The handle is a comfort, smooth hickory worn to the exact contours of your grip. The steel head weighing maybe 3 pounds, sharp enough that you could shave with it, if mountain men were the shaving type. This tool is more than utility. It's the difference between shelter and exposure, between morning and never. You learned to swing an axe as a boy back in Pennsylvania, clearing your father's land, but that was different. That was work done in summer heat, with breaks for water and your mother's cornbread. This is survival, and every swing has to count, because your hands, already going stiff in the cold, won't last forever. You estimate you've got maybe 30 minutes of effective work before the cold starts seriously degrading your motor skills. After that, you'll need to stop, build a fire, warm up. But first, you need something worth warming up inside of. The fallen lodgepole pine is your primary building material. 20 feet long, relatively straight, about 10 inches in diameter. It's almost like the mountain left it here specifically for you. You know better than to believe in providence out here, but you're not above being grateful when things line up in your favor. You position yourself at one end and start measuring with your eye, marking mental cut points. You'll need support poles first, 2 uprights, each about 7 feet tall, to create the frame for your slanted roof. The first swing bites into the wood with a satisfying thunk. Dried lodgepole cuts clean if you know what you're doing, and you do. You aim for the same spot again and again, cutting a V-notch that goes deeper with each blow. Swing, bite, pull. You think about the men who taught you this. James Clyman, who survived a winter that killed 2 of his companions, by building a shelter so well insulated with pine boughs that snow drifted over the entrance and sealed him in for 3 days. He told you he'd eaten nothing but a handful of dried berries and his leather belt, boiled into something resembling soup. The mountain teaches you what you can survive, he'd said, and it's always more than you think, right up until it's not. The notch goes deep enough that you can switch sides, cutting from the opposite direction. The wood is starting to give, creaking under its own weight. 2 more swings and it falls away clean. 7 feet of support pole, straight and true. You drag it to the outcrop, stand it upright, and eyeball the positioning. It needs to be about 4 feet out from the rock face, creating a triangular shelter space that will be deep enough to lie down in, but low enough to trap heat. You let it fall and turn back for the second pole. Your breath is coming harder now, steam pouring from your mouth and nose, and you realize you're sweating under your capote despite the cold. That's dangerous. Sweat is death out here. It soaks into your clothes, and when you stop moving, it freezes against your skin, turning your own garments into refrigeration.
You measure with your arms. Fingertip to opposite shoulder is about 3 feet for you, and mark the next cut. 3 feet, cut. 3 feet, cut. You end up with 4 crossbeams, each one a different variation of roughly 3 feet, because precision isn't the goal here, functionality is. A gap of 1 inch or 3 won't matter once you've packed everything with insulation. Now you need to secure the uprights. You drag them back to your shelter site, position them 4 feet out from the rock face, and realize you need to anchor them. The ground is already starting to freeze. You test it with your knife, and the blade barely penetrates. You could dig post holes, but that would take precious time and energy you can't spare. Instead, you'll use a technique you learned from watching Crow Indians build summer shelters. You'll pile rocks around the base of each pole, creating a stable foundation through sheer weight. You drop to your knees and start gathering stones from around the outcrop base, anywhere erosion and weather have exposed the mountain's bones. Each rock goes into a pile at the foot of your support poles. Big ones first, creating a foundation, then smaller ones to wedge into the gaps. Your hands are screaming now, the cold finding its way through your elk-hide gloves despite your best efforts. You can feel your fingertips going numb, that creeping numbness that starts at the extremities and works its way inward. But you keep working, because stopping means dying, and dying isn't in your plans for tonight. The uprights are stable now, standing like sentries 4 feet out from the rock face. You lift the first crossbeam. It's heavier than it should be, or maybe you're more tired than you want to admit, and position it from the top of the upright to a natural ledge in the rock face about 5 feet up. The angle isn't perfect, but it's good enough. You pull out a length of rawhide from your possibles bag. Every mountain man carried a few feet of the stuff, useful for everything from repairing moccasins to lashing shelter poles. The rawhide is stiff in the cold, almost brittle, but you work it carefully, binding the crossbeam to the upright with a series of tight wraps and knots. Your fingers fumble the first attempt. The second works better. By the third, you found the rhythm again, despite the numbness. 1 crossbeam secure, 3 to go. The light is fading fast now. That deep twilight that means you've got maybe 15 minutes before you'll be working by feel more than sight.
The snow is coming down harder, accumulating on your shoulders, your hat, the ground around you. It's already 3 inches deep and building. You move faster, not rushing but not dawdling either, finding that middle gear that eats distance without exhausting you. Second crossbeam up, third, fourth. The skeleton of your shelter is taking shape, a low, slanted roof structure that goes from 5 feet at the rock face down to about 3 feet at the front uprights. It's not tall enough to sit upright in, but that's intentional. Less space means less air to heat, means your body warmth and the fire's heat will be trapped more efficiently. You're not building a cabin, you're building a survival envelope, the minimum necessary space to keep yourself alive. Now comes one of the most critical parts. You need to fill in that frame with smaller branches, creating a lattice that will support the insulation you'll pile on top. You scan the surrounding forest, looking for deadfall, for branches that broke off in past storms. There, a pile of spruce branches, still covered in brown needles, lying under their parent tree. You gather them by the armload, dragging them back to your shelter site. The lattice work is almost soothing, a puzzle that your hands know how to solve, even as your mind drifts. Lay a branch across the crossbeams, weave the next one perpendicular. Create a basket work pattern that's strong enough to hold weight, but open enough that you can stuff insulation into the gaps. Spruce boughs are perfect for this. They're flexible when fresh, rigid when dry, and the needles create thousands of tiny air pockets that trap heat. Your shelter is starting to look like something now. A low, dark shape against the rock. Definitely man-made. Definitely purposeful. You step back for just a moment, letting yourself feel a flicker of satisfaction. But only a flicker, because you're maybe halfway done, and the easy part is over. Now comes the hard part. Insulation, weatherproofing, making this pile of sticks into something that will actually keep you alive when the temperature drops to 0, 10 below, 20 below, however cold this storm decides to get. Your hands are barely working now, fingers like wooden sticks inside your gloves. You need to stop, need to build a fire, need to warm up. But if you stop now, before the basic structure is secure, the wind might tear it apart while you're huddled by the flames. So you keep going, just a little longer, just enough to make sure your work won't be undone. You gather more spruce boughs, laying them thick across the lattice roof, overlapping them like shingles so that water, or in this case, melting snow, will run downward instead of seeping through. Layer upon layer, each one a small insurance policy against the cold. The shelter is getting darker inside, more enclosed, more cave-like. Good. Finally, you allow yourself to stop. Your hands are shaking, not from exertion but from cold, and you know you've pushed right up to the edge of what's safe. Time to build a fire.
You drop to your knees at the front of your shelter, and for just a moment, you let yourself feel the exhaustion that's been building in your bones. Your hands are trembling, fine tremors that aren't entirely from cold, but from sustained effort, and your shoulders burn from swinging the axe and hauling timber. But there's no time for rest, not yet. You've got the frame of a shelter, but without walls, without insulation, without proper ceiling. It's just an elaborate way to die slightly more slowly. You force yourself to your feet and scan what's left of your immediate surroundings in the dying light. The snow is coming down in sheets now. Visibility may be 50 feet, and the wind is picking up that peculiar howl that tells you the real storm is just getting started. What you've experienced so far is the overture. The symphony of killing cold is still building. First priority, gather insulation materials while you can still see. You learned from the French trappers that the best insulation isn't what keeps you warm, it's what keeps the cold out. There's a difference, subtle but crucial. Your body generates heat. The shelter's job is to trap that heat and prevent it from escaping. Every gap, every crack, every opening is a thief stealing your life degree by degree. You start with moss. There's plenty of it growing on the north side of the trees around you. That thick, spongy stuff that holds moisture like a sponge in summer, but dries out and becomes remarkably insulating in winter. You peel it off in great...
You make 3 trips to the creek, each time carrying double handfuls of mud back to your shelter, depositing it in a growing pile. Your gloves are soaked now, which means they're useless, so you strip them off and work with bare hands. The cold bites immediately, but wet gloves are worse than no gloves. They'll freeze solid and turn your hands into blocks of ice. Better to work fast with exposed skin and then warm up by the fire you're about to build. The walls come next. You need to close in the sides of your shelter, creating an enclosed space with only one opening, the entrance where your fire will burn. You return to the fallen timber, cutting more sections, these ones shorter and meant to be stacked rather than lashed. The technique is simple but labor-intensive. Lay a log parallel to the rock face, then another, building up a wall log by log. You don't need perfection, you need functionality. Gaps of an inch or 2 are fine. You'll fill those with your moss-mud mixture. You work on the east wall first, the side where the wind is starting to curl around the outcrop and probe for weaknesses. Log by log, the wall rises. 1 foot high, 2 feet, 3. You only need to go up about 4 feet, high enough to enclose the space, but low enough that you can still reach over to tend the roof. Each log is notched roughly where it meets its neighbors, creating a more stable stack. It's exhausting work, and your back is screaming by the time you finish, but the east wall is solid. The west wall goes faster. You're in a rhythm now, and your body has found...
Now comes the chinking, filling all those gaps with your moss and mud mixture. You take a handful of moss, compress it into a rough ball, smear it with mud, and stuff it into a gap between logs. Then another, and another. It's mind-numbing work, repetitive and cold and necessary. Your fingers are beyond feeling now, moving on muscle memory and will alone. You're packing each gap from both sides when you can reach, creating a seal that will keep the wind out and the heat in. There's a quirky bit of history here that most people don't know. Mountain men would sometimes add pine pitch to their mud-moss mixture. The sticky resin from pine trees would make the whole concoction more adhesive and slightly waterproof. You'd heat small chunks of pitch by the fire until they turned liquid, then mix them into the mud. It was miserable work. The pitch stuck to everything, including you, but it created a seal that could last weeks instead of days. You don't have time for that tonight, but you file the thought away. If this storm lasts longer than expected, you might need to upgrade your weatherproofing. The entrance requires special attention. This is where your fire will burn, where smoke needs to escape, where you'll enter and exit. You leave an opening about 3 feet wide, reinforcing the edges with extra logs stacked and notched. Above the entrance, you extend the roof out an extra foot,
creating a small overhang that will help direct smoke up and away while preventing snow from blowing directly into your living space. Now for the roof ceiling. You've got your lattice of spruce boughs, but that's not enough. You need more insulation, more layers, more protection against the snow that's already starting to accumulate. You gather more boughs, laying them thick, overlapping them in a shingled pattern. Then, working quickly because your hands are starting to lose coordination, you begin piling snow on top of the boughs. This seems counterintuitive, using snow as insulation, but it's one of the oldest tricks in the survival handbook. Snow is mostly air, and air is an excellent insulator. A thick layer of snow on your roof will actually help trap heat inside, while preventing wind from penetrating the structure. You shovel it on with your hands, with pieces of bark, with anything that will move the white stuff from the ground to your roof. 6 inches, 10 inches, more. Your shelter is starting to look less like a man-made structure and more like a natural part of the landscape. A low mound at the base of the outcrop, almost invisible in the storm. That's exactly what you want. The less your shelter stands out, the less wind it will catch, the less heat it will lose. But you're not done. The floor needs attention too. Right now, it's just frozen ground, which will suck heat from your body all night if you lie directly on it. You need insulation beneath you as much as above you. You gather more spruce boughs, the thickest ones you can find, and layer them on the floor of your shelter. Then more, and more. You want at least 6 inches of springy, insulating material between you and the frozen earth. There's a technique the crow taught you. Lay the boughs in alternating directions, creating a woven mat that won't compress as much under your weight. First layer runs east-west, second layer north-south, third layer east-west again. It takes time, but the result is a floor that will keep you off the frozen ground and trap air beneath you. Vital insulation that might save your toes from frostbite. You're working almost entirely by feel now. The light is gone, swallowed by storm and night. The wind is roaring through the pines, driving snow sideways, and you can feel the temperature dropping with every passing minute. Your shelter is mostly complete, but mostly won't cut it. You need to seal the final gaps, check for weaknesses, make sure that when this storm reaches its full fury, and it will, your little fortress will hold. You run your hands along every seam, every junction, feeling for gaps where wind might penetrate. When you find one, you stuff it with moss, with mud, with anything that will create a barrier. Your fingers find a gap between 2 logs on the west wall, and you pack it tight with moss until the wind no longer whistles through. Another gap near the roof, sealed. Another at the base of the east wall, sealed. Finally, you remember something Jim Bridger once told you at a rendezvous, his voice rough from years of tobacco and cold camps. A shelter's only as good as its weakest point. You can have the best walls in the Rockies, but if your door's flapping in the wind, you might as well be sleeping under a tree. You need a door, or at least something to cover the entrance when you're inside. Your canvas sheet is still in your pile of gear, and you retrieve it now, shaking off the accumulated snow. It's maybe 6 feet by 4 feet, oiled canvas that you've used as everything from a ground cloth to an emergency roof. Tonight, it's going to be your door. You fashion a simple curtain, securing the top edge to the roof overhang with more rawhide, letting the bottom edge hang free. When you're inside, you'll weight the bottom with stones, creating a seal that will keep most of the weather out, while still allowing smoke from your fire to escape over the top. You step back and look at what you've built. In the darkness and snow, it's almost invisible. A low hump at the base of the outcrop, more burrow than building. It's crude, rough, assembled from whatever the mountain provided. But it's solid, it's sealed, it's going to keep you alive. Your hands are completely numb now, white and waxy in what little light remains. You need fire, and you need it immediately. But first, you allow yourself one moment of grim satisfaction. You've built shelter against deadly cold with nothing but an axe, a knife, and the knowledge passed down from men who learned the hard way.
You kneel at the entrance of your shelter, and your hands are trembling so badly that you almost can't open your possibles bag. This is the moment, the critical juncture where everything you've built either becomes salvation or just an elaborate coffin. A shelter without fire is just a fancy way to die slightly slower, more comfortably perhaps, but still dead. Fire is life. Fire is everything. Your possibles bag is a greasy leather pouch that hangs from your belt, and right now it contains the most valuable items you own. Not your rifle, not your traps, those can be replaced. What's in this bag cannot. You fumble with the drawstring, your white, waxy fingers barely responding to your brain's commands. Finally, it opens, and you reach inside with the careful reverence of a man handling sacred objects. First item, your char cloth. These are small squares of cotton fabric that you've burned in an oxygen-deprived environment, basically charred until they're black but not ash. They catch sparks like nothing else in nature, smouldering at the slightest provocation. You've got maybe a dozen pieces wrapped in a scrap of oilcloth to keep them dry. You unwrap one carefully, cupping it in your palm to protect it from the wind and snow. Second item, flint and steel. The flint is a dark grey stone about the size of a chicken egg, one edge napped sharp. The steel is a C-shaped striker, worn smooth from years of use. This combination predates matches by centuries, and out here in the wilderness of 1834, it's the only reliable way to make fire. Sure, you could try the bow drill method, friction fire like the Indians use, but with hands this cold and time this short, that's a desperation move. Third item, tinder bundle. You keep a small stash of the finest, driest materials you can find, shredded cedar bark, cattail fluff, dried grass. It's been tucked away in your possibles bag for weeks, protected from moisture, waiting for exactly this moment. You pull out a handful and begin fluffing it up, creating a bird's nest shape with a depression in the middle where you'll place the char cloth once it catches a spark.
Third, wrist-thick logs. These are your overnight fuel, the slow burners that will keep you alive through the long, dark hours ahead. You spot a standing dead pine, what trappers call a widowmaker if it's big enough, but this one's only about 6 inches in diameter. You consider the effort of cutting it versus the payoff and decide it's worth it. Your axe is still sharp, and 3 minutes of work drops the tree. You cut it into 18-inch sections and drag them to your growing fuel pile. Your hands are so cold now that you can barely feel the axe handle. This is dangerous. You could cut yourself badly and not even know it until you saw blood in the snow. You force yourself to stop, to take inventory of your body. Fingers, white, waxy, unresponsive. Toes, still have feeling, but they're going numb inside your moccasins. Core, solid, warm from the exertion of building. Face, raw, wind-burned, but intact. Time to make fire. Right now. Not in 5 minutes, now. You arrange your materials in careful sequence, everything within arm's reach. Char cloth, check. Tinder bundle, check. Flint and steel, check. Pencil kindling, check. You take a deep breath, force your hands to steady as much as they can, and begin. Holding the flint in your left hand, the steel striker in your right, you position the char cloth on top of the flint, held in place by your thumb. The technique is simple in theory, but requires practice.
Strike the steel down the flint's edge at an angle, creating a shower of sparks. In practice, with numb hands and shaking fingers, it's exponentially harder. First strike. Sparks fly, but they miss the charcloth entirely. Second strike. Sparks hit, but the charcloth doesn't catch. Third strike. Nothing. You miss the flint completely, the steel skittering off into the snow. Your heart is pounding now, and you force yourself to breathe, to calm down. Panic is as deadly as cold out here.
Moving slowly now, carefully, you transfer the glowing charcloth to your tinder bundle, settling it into the depression you made earlier. Then you begin to blow on it, gentle at first, just barely feeding it oxygen. The charcloth's glow brightens. The tinder nearest to it begins to smoke. You blow a little harder, watching, praying to whatever gods might be listening. Smoke thickens, the glow spreads, and then, like a miracle, but really just physics and preparation meeting need, a small flame appears. It's barely bigger than a candle flame, fragile as a whispered secret, but it's real fire, actual fire, and you could weep with relief. You set the flaming tinder bundle into your fire pit and begin feeding it. One pencil twig laid gently across the flame. It catches. Another twig, another. The flame grows, strengthens, becomes more confident. Now thumb-thick branches, arranged in a careful teepee shape that allows air to flow while concentrating heat. The fire is talking now, that soft, crackling voice that's been comforting humans since we first figured this trick out 200,000 years ago. More fuel, more confidence. The fire grows from hand-sized to head-sized, flames dancing yellow and orange against the darkness. But before any of that can happen, you need to set up your fire properly. Location matters almost as much as the fire itself. You're building it just outside your shelter entrance, close enough that the heat will radiate inward, but far enough that sparks won't set your spruce bough roof ablaze. You've seen that happen. Watched a trapper named Kentucky Dan lose his winter shelter when a spark jumped from his fire to his overly dry roof. He survived the night by sheer luck and spent the next week sleeping under his horse for warmth. You clear a patch of ground about 3 feet in diameter, sweeping away snow down to the frozen earth. Then you lay down a platform of flat stones you've collected from around the outcrop. The fire needs to be elevated off the frozen ground, or it'll melt the ice beneath it and sink into a puddle of its own making. The stones also radiate heat long after the flames die down.
The fire is self-sustaining now, burning hot and clean, and you begin adding your wrist-thick logs. These will burn for hours if you're careful, and you arrange them in a configuration that'll maintain itself with minimal tending. The heat radiating from the flames is substantial, and you can feel it bouncing off the rock face behind your shelter, reflecting back toward the entrance. That's why you chose this spot. The rock acts as a natural reflector, doubling the effectiveness of your fire. You retrieve your tin cup from your gear pile and pack it with snow. Balancing it on a flat stone at the fire's edge, you watch as the snow slowly melts and begins to steam. You'll need water. Staying hydrated is crucial in cold weather, even though you might not feel thirsty. Dehydration kills as surely as hypothermia, just slower and sneakier. While the snow melts, you take stock of your situation. You've got shelter, sealed, insulated, as good as you're going to get it tonight. You've got fire, burning strong, fuel for hours. You've got water in progress. What you don't have is food, but that's survivable. Humans can go weeks without food if they have to. It's the cold that kills, and you've just defeated the cold's main weapon. There's a piece of folklore among mountain men that historians still debate. The idea that you could survive a blizzard by crawling inside a freshly killed buffalo carcass. Jim Bridger swore it was true, said he'd done it himself during the winter of 1829. Other trappers called it tall-tale nonsense. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Could you survive a night inside a dead animal? Maybe, if you were desperate enough. But you'd smell like death for weeks, and you'd probably attract every predator within 5 miles. Better to know how to build proper shelter. Your water is boiling now, steam rising into the cold air. While you wait, you prepare your shelter's interior for the night ahead. You spread your wool blanket over the spruce bough floor, creating a layer between you and the insulation. Then you arrange your gear, rifle within arm's reach, possibles bag next to your head, knife under the blanket where body heat will keep it from freezing in its sheath. Everything has its place, everything positioned for maximum efficiency if you need to move quickly in the dark. The canvas door gets weighted down with stones along the bottom edge, creating a seal that's not perfect, but good enough. Smoke from the fire will still escape over the top, but wind and snow are mostly blocked. The temperature inside your shelter is already noticeably warmer than outside, maybe 40 degrees instead of 20. And it'll only get better as your body heat and the fire's radiation do their work. You sip your broth slowly, letting the heat spread through your chest, your stomach, your core. It tastes like boiled leather and wood smoke, but it's the best thing you've ever eaten. Each swallow is a small victory, a tiny rebellion against the cold that wants to kill you. Outside, the storm is reaching full fury now. The wind howls like a living thing, driving snow horizontally, piling it in drifts against anything that stands vertical. You can hear trees creaking under the weight, occasional cracks as branches break and fall. But inside your shelter, you're protected. The fire burns, the walls hold. The roof sheds snow rather than collecting it. You've done it. You've built shelter against deadly cold, and you're going to survive the night.
But surviving and being comfortable are two different.
You settle back against your pack, arranged to prop you up at a slight angle, where you can watch the fire and the entrance simultaneously. The spruce boughs beneath you are surprisingly comfortable, springy and insulating. The heat from the fire washes over you in waves, and for the first time in hours, you allow yourself to relax just slightly. This is mountain life. This is freedom. This is survival. And tomorrow, when the storm clears, you'll emerge into a transformed world and continue your journey. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, you've got shelter, fire, and life. That's enough. The fire is hypnotic, flames dancing in patterns that seem almost intelligent, and you have to force yourself not to stare too long into the shifting orange and yellow light. There's an old trapper's saying, "A man who watches his fire too long loses his night eyes, and a man without night eyes in the wilderness is already dead." So you let your gaze drift between the flames and the darkness beyond, keeping your vision balanced, staying alert. The wind outside has reached a pitch that sounds less like weather and more like a living creature trying to tear your shelter apart. You can hear it screaming around the outcrop, battering against your log walls, testing every seal you've made. Snow is accumulating fast. You can see it piling against the rocks near your entrance, building drifts that within an hour will be knee-high, waist-high, maybe even taller. The mountain is trying to bury you, and your shelter is all that stands between you and that fate. You add another log to the fire, positioning it carefully to maintain the coal bed underneath. Fire management is an art form you've learned through cold experience, literally. Too much fuel and you'll exhaust your woodpile by midnight. Too little and the fire dies, and with it your best source of heat. The trick is finding that sweet spot where the fire burns steady and sustainable, producing maximum heat with minimum consumption. The flames catch on the new log, and sparks spiral upward into the darkness. You watch them rise, bright against the black, and think about all the men who didn't make it, who ran out of fuel or lost their fire, or built their shelters poorly and paid the ultimate price. There's a loneliness to this life that people back in the settlements don't understand. It's not the absence of people that gets to you. It's the absolute knowledge that if something goes wrong, you're on your own. No one is coming. No rescue party. No friendly neighbor. Just you and your skills and luck. Your thoughts drift to William Sublette and Jedediah Smith, two of the most famous mountain men of the era. Smith would die just a few years from now, 1831, killed by Comanches on the Cimarron River. Not by cold, not by starvation, but by the violence that was always lurking at the edges of this life. Sublette would survive longer, making a fortune in the fur trade before eventually settling in Missouri. But tonight, in 1834, they're both out here somewhere, running their trap lines, surviving storms just like this one. The coffee, if you can call it that, is ready. You'd thrown a handful of grounds into your tin cup, and now you fish them out with your fingers, flicking them into the fire where they sizzle and smoke. The resulting liquid is bitter, almost undrinkable, but the warmth is worth it. Caffeine isn't why mountain men drank coffee. Heat delivery was. A cup of hot liquid was a portable furnace, warming you from the inside out. You wrap both hands around the cup, feeling the metal almost too hot to touch, and you let that heat soak into your palms, your fingers, your wrists. Your hands are still red and raw, but they're functional again. You'll have some minor frostbite, probably lose a little skin on your fingertips over the next few days, but you'll keep all your digits. That's a win in this business. The interior of your shelter is warming up nicely. You estimate it's close to 50 degrees now, maybe even warmer near the roof where the hot air collects. That's a 70-degree difference from the temperature outside, where the mercury has probably dropped below zero. Your walls are holding, your roof is shedding snow rather than collecting it, and the smoke from your fire is escaping over the top of your canvas door rather than filling your living space. All good signs. But there's a problem developing that you need to address: condensation. As the warm, moist air from your breath and the fire meets the cold surfaces of your shelter walls, water vapor is condensing into droplets. You can see them forming on the logs, on the underside of the roof, tiny beads of moisture that will eventually freeze and create ice within your shelter. That's bad for two reasons. Ice reduces your insulation value, and more importantly, if it melts when the sun comes up, you'll wake up soaked. The solution is ventilation. You need to allow some of the moist air to escape while retaining enough heat to stay warm. It's a delicate balance. You adjust your canvas door, propping it open slightly at the top with a stick, creating a small gap for air exchange. Immediately, you feel the temperature drop a few degrees, but the condensation stops forming. That trade-off is worth it. Outside, something crashes, probably a dead branch giving way under accumulated snow weight. The sound is sharp, sudden, and your hand automatically goes to your rifle. Out here, you develop reflexes that serve you well. Every unexpected sound gets evaluated. Threat or not threat, animal or weather, close or distant. Your brain processes it in seconds. Definitely a branch, probably 50 yards east, no threat. Your hand leaves the rifle, but you remain alert. There's a rhythm to night survival that you've learned over the years. Check the fire every hour, add fuel as needed. Flex your fingers and toes every 20 minutes to ensure circulation. Drink water even when you're not thirsty. Eat something, anything, every few hours to keep your metabolism fired up. Stay alert, but allow yourself to rest. It's a discipline, a structure that imposes order on the chaos of wilderness survival. You pull out your whetstone and your knife, not because the blade needs sharpening, though it probably does, but because the routine is soothing and productive. The rhythmic scrape of steel on stone, the careful attention to angle and pressure, the meditative quality of the work, it all helps pass the time while keeping your hands busy and your mind focused. The knife is a Green River blade, named for the manufacturer whose work sat along the Green River in Massachusetts. GR, stamped into the blade, was a mark of quality that every mountain man recognized. This particular knife has been with you for 3 years, and in that time, it's skinned more animals than you can count, cut shelter poles, prepared meals, defended you twice from aggressive wildlife, and served as everything from a hammer to a saw, depending on what you needed in the moment. As you work the blade across the stone, you think about the economics of this life. A prime beaver pelt might fetch $5 at Rendezvous. That's a week's wages for a factory worker back east. But out here, it represents a day's work at best. Assuming you find beaver, and assuming they're trapped successfully, and assuming you don't lose your pelts to theft, or weather, or river crossings gone wrong. The mathematics are brutal. High risk, uncertain reward, and a strong likelihood of dying broke if you don't die dead first. So why do it? That's the question folks back in civilization always asked when you made it to Rendezvous, when you traded your furs and told your stories. Why choose this life of hardship and danger and isolation? The answers were different for every man. Some were running from something: debts, crimes, broken hearts, families they disappointed. Others were running towards something: adventure, freedom, the chance to be someone other than who society expected them to be.
For you, it was simpler. You didn't fit anywhere else. The settled world with its rules and expectations and narrow definitions of success felt like a prison. Out here, your worth was measured by what you could do, not who your father was or how much land you owned. A man who could read sign trap beaver, and survive a blizzard was respected regardless of his last name or his accent or the circumstances of his birth. The knife is sharp now, sharp enough that you can shave a sliver of wood off a stick with minimal pressure. You test the edge carefully, then slide it back into its sheath. The routine is complete. Another small task accomplished. Another hour of the night managed. Your fire needs attention, so you add another 2 logs, arrange them to maximize burn time, and settle back. The heat is substantial now, almost uncomfortable on your face and chest, while your back remains cold. You rotate periodically, like a roast on a spit, trying to warm all sides evenly. It's impossible to be comfortable. One side is always too hot, while the other's too cold. But comfort isn't the goal. Survival is. Outside, the storm continues its assault. The wind hasn't let up at all. If anything, it's stronger now. And you can hear how the snow...
You scan your shelter's interior, looking for any signs of snow infiltration. There, a tiny drift forming in the southeast corner. Fine white powder sifting through a gap you missed. You'll need to seal that, but not now. Now, you'll just monitor it. If it gets worse, you'll stuff more moss into the gap from the inside. If it stays minor, you'll leave it alone because every time you open a seal to fix it, you risk making it worse. There's a sound outside, not a branch this time, but something else. Something moving. You freeze, listening intently. There it is again. A soft crunching in the snow, irregular, definitely not wind. Your hand finds your rifle, and you ease the hammer back slowly, trying not to make noise. The sound comes closer. Then you hear it. A snort, a shuffle, the unmistakable sound of a large animal. Elk, you think. Or maybe a moose. Definitely not a predator. Wrong cadence, wrong pattern. The animal pauses near your shelter, probably confused by the firelight and smell, trying to decide if you're a threat. You remain absolutely still, barely breathing. The last thing you need is a panicked elk crashing through your shelter. After what feels like an eternity, but is probably only 30 seconds, the animal moves on. You hear it trudging away through the deep snow, and you allow yourself to breathe again. The rifle hammer gets eased back down to safety, and you add startle large herbivores to the list of things that could have gone wrong tonight, but didn't. The encounter reminds you that you're not alone out here, despite the isolation. The wilderness is full of life, all of it trying to survive the same storm you are, all of it using strategies honed over millennia. The elk will be huddled in a grove of pines, using the trees as windbreaks and the shared body heat of the herd to stay warm. The bears are denned up, hibernating, their metabolism slowed to a crawl. The smaller animals, rabbits, mice, ermine, are in burrows beneath the snow, insulated by the very thing that could kill you. You're the only thing out here trying to survive through technology rather than biology, and that makes you both powerful and vulnerable. Your shelter, your fire, your tools, they're all that stands between you and the same fate as any other animal caught unprepared in a blizzard. You check your extremities again, fingers still mobile, toes still responding. Good. You take another sip of your terrible coffee, grimacing at the bitterness. The night is only a few hours old, and you've got a long way to go before dawn. But you're alive, you're warm enough, and your shelter is holding. For tonight, in the winter of 1834, high in the Rocky Mountains, that's all that matters. The fire crackles softly, a companion in the darkness, and you settle in for the long vigil ahead. Outside, the blizzard rages. Inside, you endure. And somewhere between those two realities,
the chaos without and the ordered survival within, you find a strange sort of peace. Not comfort, never comfort, but something deeper. The satisfaction of meeting a challenge and holding your ground. You feed the fire another log and watch the sparks spiral upward into the night, carrying with them your determination to see another sunrise. The storm hits its peak around what you estimate is midnight, though you have no way to know for certain. Time becomes slippery in the dark, measured not by clocks, but by the gradual consumption of your firewood pile and the slow progress of the moon behind the storm clouds, invisible but felt in the way the darkness shifts from absolute to merely profound and back again. The wind is no longer howling, it's screaming. The sound is constant, a high-pitched shriek that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And underneath it, you can hear the deeper bass notes of the storm, the groan of trees bending under impossible strain, the percussion of branches snapping, the whisper roar of billions of snowflakes being driven like horizontal rain against every surface. Your shelter shudders, not constantly, but in waves as the strongest gusts hit. You can feel it through the logs, through the ground itself, a trembling that makes your heart race because you know that shelters can fail, that walls can collapse, that roofs can cave in under the weight of accumulated snow and the force of wind. You've heard the stories, hell, you've seen the aftermath, of men who built poorly or chose badly and paid with their lives. But your shelter holds. The logs you notched and stacked remain solid. The mud moss chinking you packed into every gap has frozen hard as concrete, creating a seal that the wind can't penetrate. The rock face at your back is immovable, ancient, indifferent to the storm's fury. And the roof, that carefully constructed lattice of poles and spruce boughs, now buried under what must be 2 feet of snow. That roof sheds the accumulation at just the right rate, dumping it in slides to either side, rather than collecting weight that could bring the whole structure down. You learned about roof pitch from a French-Canadian trapper named Baptiste, who'd spent winters in the far north, where the snow fell so heavy it could crush a cabin if you built the roof too flat. Steep enough to slide, shallow enough to insulate, he told you, his accent thick as honey. Find that angle, The fire is your lifeline now, and you tend it with the attention most men reserve for newborn children. Every hour you add fuel, never too much, never too little. You've developed a sense for it, an instinct that tells you when the coal bed needs feeding, when the flames need air, when everything's balanced just right. The wood pile you gathered earlier is depleting faster than you'd like, and you make a mental calculation. Dawn is maybe 6 hours away, and you've got fuel for 8 if you're careful. That's good. That's survival. But fuel isn't your only concern. The cold is probing, testing, looking for weaknesses. You can feel it seeping up from the ground despite the thick layer of spruce boughs beneath you. You can feel it radiating from the canvas door despite the fire's heat. You can feel it in the air itself, how each breath you take seems to steal a tiny bit of warmth from your lungs. The temperature outside has to be somewhere around 20 below zero, maybe colder with the wind chill, and your shelter's interior, warmed by fire and body heat and sheer determination, is probably hovering around 40 degrees. That's a 60-degree buffer, and it's the only thing keeping you alive. Your wool blanket is wrapped around your shoulders now, and you've pulled your knees up to your chest, making yourself as compact as possible to conserve heat. It's not comfortable,
Nothing about this is comfortable. But comfort is a luxury for people in houses, not for men in the wilderness. You've learned to measure success in much simpler terms. Am I alive? Am I warm enough to stay alive? Grizzlies should be hibernating in December, denned up in caves or hollow trees, their metabolism slowed to almost nothing. Should be. But should be and are don't always align in the wilderness. Sometimes a bear goes into hibernation too late. Sometimes they wake up mid-winter, confused and hungry and extraordinarily dangerous. And sometimes, though rarely, they never den up at all, wandering through the winter like furry ghosts, starving and desperate, and willing to eat anything they can find, including mountain men. You ease your rifle into your hands, checking that the powder is dry, that the flint is seated properly, that everything is ready to fire if needed. The bear's roar comes again, closer this time, maybe 100 yards away. It's hard to judge distance in a storm, sound doing strange things in wind and snow, but that felt close. Too close. You add more wood to your fire, building it up until the flames are leaping high, casting light in a circle maybe 20 feet in diameter. Fire is the only thing grizzlies truly respect, and you need that respect right now. Your heart is hammering in your chest, adrenaline flooding your system, and you have to consciously slow your breathing because panic uses energy, and energy is heat, and heat is life. The bear roars again, but this time it's more distant, moving away. You listen intently, tracking its progress through the storm by sound alone, and gradually the roars fade until they're swallowed completely by the wind. The bear has moved on, probably never even knew you were here.
The fact that the bear passed you by is luck, pure and simple. But out here, you'll take luck wherever you can find it. The encounter leaves you shaken, too alert to rest, so you busy yourself with small tasks. You check your gear, making sure everything is dry, organized, accessible. You examine your rifle in detail, wiping down the metal parts with an oiled rag, checking the integrity of the stock. You count your ammunition, 12 shots plus powder and ball for maybe twice that many if you're careful. And you're reminded how precious each shot is. Powder doesn't grow on trees, and the nearest place to resupply is hundreds of miles away. You think about the men who are your only real community in this vast wilderness. The other trappers you'll see at rendezvous come summer, if you survive that long. Kit Carson, probably holed up somewhere to the south. Jim Bridger, who claims to have seen geysers that shoot boiling water hundreds of feet in the air, though most men think he's lying. Jedediah Smith, whose Bible is as much a part of his gear as his rifle. These men are your brothers in a way that goes deeper than blood, bound together by shared experience and mutual understanding of what this life demands. Historians still argue about whether the mountain men were pioneers or opportunists, whether they opened the West or exploited it, whether their legacy is heroic or problematic. But sitting here in your shelter while a blizzard tries to kill you, those debates seem absurd. You're not pioneering anything, you're just trying to survive until morning. The beaver you trap aren't resources to be exploited. They're currency that lets you buy another year of freedom. And legacy? Most mountain men don't live long enough to worry about legacy. The storm begins to ease around what you estimate is 4 in the morning. The wind doesn't stop, It never fully stops in the mountains, but it drops from screaming fury to merely howling. The snow continues to fall, but it's less dense now, less driven.
You allow yourself a small measure of hope. If the storm is breaking, you might be able to emerge by mid-morning. Check your trap lines if they're not buried. Maybe even get moving to a lower elevation where the weather will be less severe. But that's future thinking, and the future doesn't exist yet. Right now, there's only this moment. You, your shelter, your fire, and the slowly weakening storm. You add more wood to the fire, drink more water, chew another piece of jerked elk. Your body is exhausted, running on reserves, but your mind is sharp, kept alert by necessity and the knowledge that falling asleep could mean never waking up. Hypothermia is sneaky. It lulls you, makes you drowsy, convinces you that sleeping is exactly what you need. And then you sleep, and your body temperature drops, and you never wake up. They find you in spring, curled up like you were just resting, not dead at all, except that you are. So you stay awake, you tend your fire, you flex your fingers and toes, you rotate your body to warm all sides evenly, you endure. The darkness begins to fade around 6 in the morning, or at least you think it's 6. It could be 5 or 7, but there's definitely a lessening of the absolute blackness, a hint of grey creeping into the world. Dawn.
The first light of dawn filters through the storm like a promise only half kept. It's not sunshine. That would be too much to hope for, but rather a gradual shift from the absolute blackness of night to the murky grey of a world still buried in cloud and snow. But it's light, and light means you've crossed the threshold from desperate night survival to whatever comes next. You sit at the entrance of your shelter, canvas door pulled aside, and survey the transformed landscape. The world you see bears almost no resemblance to the one you entered yesterday evening. Where there were individual trees, now there are suggestions of trees, white shrouded forms that could be anything. Where there was ground, now there's an undulating sea of snow, drifted in some places to heights that would bury you completely, blown clear in others to expose patches of frozen earth. Your shelter is nearly invisible, you realize. The snow has drifted against and over it, creating a low mound that looks completely natural. Just another irregularity in the winter landscape. Only your fire pit, still burning with a few stubborn coals, and the slight discoloration of smoke against white give away any human presence. This is good for more reasons than camouflage. That snow is insulation, an extra layer of protection that raised the interior temperature through the night without you even realizing it. The storm hasn't stopped entirely, but it's broken. The wind is down to maybe 10 or 15 miles per hour, still substantial, but no longer deadly. Snow continues to fall, but it's lazy now, big flakes drifting down rather than being driven horizontally. You estimate there's 3 feet of new accumulation, maybe more in the drifts. Your horse is fine. You can see him tied to the pine where you left him, standing with his back to the wind, covered in snow, but alive and alert. Horses are tougher than people give them credit for. You need to move, need to get your blood flowing, but you're cautious about it. Your body has been cramped in a semi-sitting position all night, and your muscles are stiff, cold, reluctant. You start with small movements, wiggling toes inside your moccasins, flexing your fingers, rotating your shoulders. Everything protests, but everything works. That's a victory. Standing requires effort, your legs shaking as you rise, but you manage it. The cold hits immediately. It's probably still below zero out here. The kind of cold that makes your nostrils stick together when you breathe in, that makes your eyes water and the tears freeze on your cheeks. You pull your capote tighter, adjust your hat, and take your first steps out of the shelter. The snow is deep enough that you sink to mid-thigh with each step, and you realize immediately that traveling anywhere today is going to be exhausting, maybe impossible. But that's okay. You've got shelter, you've got some supplies, and most importantly, you've proved that you can survive out here. You can wait another day or two for the snow to settle, for conditions to improve. But first, you need to take stock of your situation. Your shelter survived the night intact. That's immediately obvious. The walls are solid, the roof is still in place, and there's no visible damage. Your fire pit is still functional. The stones you arrange still holding heat, even though the flames have died down to coals. Your gear pile is where you left it, partially buried in snow, but intact. Everything essential is accounted for. Your horse needs attention, so you wade through the deep snow to check on him. He nick-kickers softly when you approach, and you brush the snow off his back, his neck, his face. His coat is thick, winter-ready, and underneath the snow he's dry and warm. You don't have much food for him, but you pull out a handful of the dried corn you keep in your pack and let him eat from your hand. His warm, looking around, you try to spot landmarks, to orient yourself in this white wilderness. The outcrop is obvious, that hasn't changed, but everything else is transformed. The creek you were following is completely buried now, marked only by a slight depression in the snow. The tree line looks different, individual trunks and branches lost in the uniformity of white. If you didn't have the rock face as a reference point, you could be anywhere. This is how men get lost and die, even after surviving the worst of a storm. They emerge from their shelters, try to orient themselves in the changed landscape, make one wrong turn, and that's it. You've heard of trappers found frozen just 100 yards from their camps, circled around by their own tracks as they wandered in confusion until hypothermia took them. But you're not going to be one of those men. You've got your shelter, you know where you are, and you're not going anywhere until conditions improve substantially. Patience, you've learned, is as important a survival skill as fire-making or shelter building. You return to your shelter and rebuild the fire, coaxing flames from the coals with practiced efficiency. Soon you've got a good blaze going, and you set your tin cup in the snow, filling it, then balancing it near the flames to melt. You'll drink, you'll eat, and then you'll rest properly. Actual sleep, now that daylight and improved conditions make it safer. While the water heats, you examine your hands in the growing light. The fingertips are white and waxy still, with some blistering that indicates minor frostbite. You'll lose some skin over the next few days, but you'll keep the fingers. Your toes feel okay, cold but not damaged. Your face is raw and windburned, but that's superficial. Overall, you've come through the night in remarkably good shape.
You think about the trappers who didn't make it, the ones who got caught without time to build shelter, or who built poorly, or whose fires went out, or who simply made one small mistake that cascaded into disaster. The wilderness doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't grade on a curve or give partial credit. You either survive or you don't, and the margin between the two is often impossibly thin. There's a story that Jim Bridger used to tell about a greenhorn trapper who froze to death within sight of a trading post because he didn't know how to read the signs of severe frostbite. The man's feet had gone numb, but instead of recognizing that as a medical emergency, he figured they were just cold and kept walking. By the time he reached help, his feet were black with gangrene. He died a week later, screaming as the infection spread. The moral of the story, Bridger would say, was simple. The mountain teaches in whispers first, then screams. If you don't listen to the whispers, you won't survive the screams. Your water is boiling now, and you fix yourself another cup of that terrible coffee, savoring the bitterness and the heat equally. The storm is definitely breaking. You can see patches of lighter sky to the west, suggesting that the clouds are thinning. By afternoon, you might even see sun. By tomorrow, you could be mobile again. But for now, you're content to sit at the entrance of your shelter, wrapped in your blanket, warming your hands on a cup of bad coffee, watching the world slowly emerge from its white cocoon. You're alive. You're warm enough. You've survived a deadly blizzard through nothing but skill, knowledge, and determination. This is why you came to the mountains. Not for moments like
The sun breaks through the clouds for just a moment, a single shaft of light that illuminates the snow-covered landscape and makes everything sparkle like diamonds scattered across white velvet. It's beautiful, achingly, impossibly beautiful, and you allow yourself a rare smile. You'll break camp tomorrow or the day after, once the snow settles enough to make travel feasible. You'll check your trap lines, though you expect most of them are buried or sprung. You'll make your way to lower elevation, following the creek once you can find it again. And eventually, you'll make your way to Rendezvous, where you'll trade your furs and resupply and tell stories about the winter of 1834 and the blizzard that tried to kill you but failed. Other trappers will listen, nodding, because they've all got similar stories. Every mountain man who survived more than one winter has faced the cold and won, though not always without cost. You'll all compare scars, literal and figurative, and you'll remember the ones who aren't there anymore, the ones who didn't make it, whose bones are still up in the high country, waiting for spring thaw to reveal them. But that's future thinking again. Right now, there's just this moment. You, your shelter, your fire, and the morning after the storm. The mountain tried to kill you. You built walls and made fire and refused to die. And here you are, watching the sunrise through breaking clouds, alive and unbroken. That's enough. That's everything.
The fire is burning low now, just gentle flames and glowing coals. And the light has that soft, diffused quality of late morning after a storm. You're warm, truly warm, for the first time in what feels like days. And the exhaustion that you've been holding at bay through sheer will is finally catching up with you. It's safe now to let it. Safe to close your eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. Safe to let your guard down just slightly. Outside your shelter, the world is settling into its new configuration. Snow will melt eventually. Spring always comes, even to the high country. And the landscape will reveal itself again. Creeks will run high with meltwater. The beaver will emerge from their lodges. The grass will green up, and the elk will move to higher pastures, and the whole cycle will begin again. But that's months away still. For now, everything is white and quiet and deeply, profoundly peaceful. You add one last log to your fire, not because you need it, but because you can, because you have fuel, and you have time, and you have survived. The flames catch and grow, painting dancing shadows on your shelter walls, and you watch them with heavy-lidded eyes. Your breathing is slow and steady. Your heartbeat is calm. Every part of your body is finally relaxing, unclenching from the survival tension that's been holding you rigid all night. This is what the mountain gives to those who listen, who learn, who respect its power without cowering before it. The knowledge that you're stronger than you knew, more capable.
So you do. You settle back against your pack, pull your blanket tight around your shoulders, and let your eyes drift closed. The fire will burn for hours yet. The shelter is solid. The storm has passed. Everything you needed to do, you've done. Everything you needed to survive, you survived. And now, finally, you can rest. The mountain will still be here when you wake. So will you. And that's all that matters, really. That simple fact of continued existence, earned through knowledge and effort and will. You made it through. You built shelter against the cold, and the shelter held. Sleep comes easily now, deep and dreamless. The sleep of exhaustion and relief and quiet triumph. You survived the blizzard. And tomorrow there will be new challenges, new decisions, new miles to travel. But tomorrow is tomorrow. Tonight you are warm, you are safe, you are alive. And that is enough. Rest now. The mountain will keep watch while you sleep.